Hello, I'm Business News reporter Jim Stafford, and today we're honored to have as our guest Dudley Hyde, an attorney and pension specialist with McAfee Taft here in Oklahoma City. Welcome, Mr. Hyde.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Well, the Oklahoman has produced a special section on everything retirement, and you can't talk about retirement without talking about a pension. And that's why we brought you here, because you're an expert on the subject. And from what I've heard and read in recent years, that pension plans have undergone a big, I call it evolution, might be revolution. Anyway, as I understand it, the old defined benefit plans are almost a thing of the past. Can you tell me what a defined benefit plan is and what happened to those plans?
Sure, Jim. I'd be glad to. And your topic is very timely. Absolutely. A defined benefit plan is a tax-qualified retirement plan in which a benefit is defined as a benefit and a promise to pay a retirement benefit at a specified age, typically age 65. Under that type of plan, there's a formula, and use a very simple example. For each year that you work with Company X, the plan will create a accrue benefit of 1% of pay times your years of service. So, for example, if an individual worked 30 years for that company and it was 1% of pay, that's 30%. If final pay was $100,000, then his monthly or his annual benefit would be $30,000 a year. There's no risk to the employee in that type of program. All he has to know is my company is going to be solvent and the plan will be there when I get ready to retire. And that is essentially what a defined benefit plan is. The benefit is defined today.
Okay. Well, then, what happened to those plans? And as I understand it, they've kind of been replaced by something called a defined contribution plan. Now, what are those plans?
All right. A defined contribution plan is a plan in which either the employee, say for example through a 401k plan, or the employer makes a contribution to a plan. That money, either the employee money or the employer money, is then held in a separate account. And then that account is invested either by a professional trustee or by the individual through a self-directed account. The biggest difference we've seen, and I must say I started working in the pension area in 1974 with McAffee Taft. I've been there ever since. I've seen a lot of changes. In 1985, there were approximately 170,000 defined benefit plans. Today, there's approximately 25 to 30,000, and some of those are what we call frozen. In other words, they haven't been terminated, they've just been frozen, so no more benefits accrue. Several changes. One, the government has imposed a very strict regulatory oversight scheme over these types of plans. The employers are required to put a certain amount of money in. If they don't put it in, they're subject to a special excise tax. The interest rates or the discount rates that are used in those plans are not set by the employer. They're set by the federal government through the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. And lastly, the earnings in those plans, whether it goes up or down, all the investment risk rests on the employer. And through the upheavals in the stock market through through the 80s and the late 90s, or early 2000, these employers all of a sudden, they thought their contribution, for example, may be $500,000 to the plan, and the plan specialist, the actuary, shows up the day before the tax return and says, oh, wrong, it's going to be $2 million. Well, I didn't even know that. So all this sticker shock and lack of ability to control the outcome from the investment standpoint and also the parameters in which the government requires those plans to operate. So employers have frozen those plans, they've terminated those plans, and they said, we're shifting the retirement risk to the employee. We're out of that business. We'll set up a vehicle, we'll do the best we can on solid investment options, but from that point forward, it's yours.
Well, with the recent collapse of some big Wall Street firms, how's that going to result in a change in thinking about pension plans where employees control the investment and where they put that money?
Well, the irony of this is during good times, like in the late 90s when the stock market was going through the roof, everybody wanted to be in a defined contribution plan because their account was their account and would run up with the market. When the market goes south and times are difficult, everybody wants to have that promised benefit of a defined benefit plan. I don't have to worry about the investment outcome. So they want to, employees, and understandably, they want to have the best of both worlds. They want the upside of the stock market when times are good. They want the underside protection of a defined benefit plan when times aren't so good.
Do you think the government may come in and say, let's figure out a way to do that?
I don't know, because the ultimate risk rests on the employer, and employers, quite honestly, they're sick to death of having these rules mandated on them that they can't control. And so they say, why should I take all the risk? I'll do what I can for the employees. I will put money in as a match in a 401k or as a discretionary employer contribution. I don't know what the government can do, because the obligation and the risk falls on the employer. And so it's I don't think they're going to come back. Those companies, a lot of the Rust Belt companies had defined benefit plans, and a lot of those companies have gone out of business. It can create a huge burden on an employer that he has to reflect on his financial statement and his income statement, and in turn that can impair their for example, the ability to borrow money to grow. So I don't see that's happening. What I do see is that this situation where the employee is directing his own investment needs to be revisited. I'm not an investment expert. I'm barely, I have my own difficult time. So what we did about 1981, we told the employee, well, here are these investment options, and here's some perspectives that they don't understand, and you read it and you make your own investment decisions. And that has not, in my opinion, has not worked out well. What has come along recently is an investment option called a target retirement date fund. And these are professionally managed accounts where, for example, if an individual is 30 years old and is going to retire at 65, that fund will automatically rebalance and reallocate that fund from 30 to 65 for that individual. For example, he's age 30, he may have a higher risk tolerance, so he may have 70 or 80% in equities. But each 5 or 10 years, that plan will automatically rebalance without the employee doing anything. It's on autopilot. And so that by the time he's 65, that investment allocation has essentially flipped, and it may be 80% in fixed income and 20% in equities. I think that's going to be very helpful, because those are professionally managed. I've just seen too many situations where people have mismanaged their own account. The employer needs to provide all the investment education and tools they can through the vendor, Fidelity or whoever it might be, Bank of Oklahoma, whoever's helping them. But it's difficult for employees to absorb all that information.
Okay. Well, Dudley Hyde, thank you for being our guest here
Glad
at
to do
the newsok.com studios, and we appreciate you enlightening us a little bit about the murky world of pension plans.
Well, all I have to say is everybody needs to stay tuned and pay attention and be involved in your retirement program. Really ask the right questions of the people in HR or the representative from the mutual fund company that comes to visit you. Don't skip those meetings. There's a lot of good information.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.